Episode 24. Charity begins abroad. I would love to take you with me on a whistle-stop tour of some Eastern European capital cities in the early noughties. More time travel, I'm afraid, but we are getting closer to the present day. I hope you don't mind tagging along with me on some of my work trips. Our first destination is the capital of Serbia. See Belgrade and shrug. The saying goes, rather unfairly I think, I prefer to concentrate on the people of Belgrade, who are so well balanced, with a chip on each shoulder. On previous visits, I have found most of them to be hospitable and charming, but then the people I've met here have been charity types, who are generally a pretty good bunch. The city centre is eminently strollable, particularly on such a beautiful June day. The pedestrian zone is airy and spacious, with Parisian-style cafes, street musicians and, for some reason unknown to me, an unfeasible number of poppies for sale. All these grand but rather blocky buildings seem to be government ministries, their austerity softened by pretty gardens and masses of red roses. From here it's just a short walk down to the river. This is the Sovo, quite a broad river in its own right, but, as you will see, very much the hors d'oeuvre to the main banquet. It's peaceful down here, so near the heart of the city. There are quite a few luxurious-looking river cruise ships basking in the sunshine, waiting for their next trip to Vienna or Budapest or the Black Sea. The brightly painted houseboats dotted around the tall reeds on both sides of the river give the place an Amsterdam feel, but our path takes us a short distance away from the river towards what looks like a tunnel. As we get closer, we see the bridge spanning a deep grassy moat, which is home to scores of armoured cars and tanks. These should look out of place parked in a moat beneath the walls of a medieval fortress, but worryingly, they do not. There's something creepy about a tank which can transfix people with fear, like a scottling tarantula. Something wrong on a deep, primeval level. The exhibition certainly seems popular with the kids and their parents, clambering all over the military hardware, much of which has seen action a mere decade ago in the disastrous war of the early 90s. The tunnel entrance beckons us from across the drawbridge, and we go through thick walls and onto the vast grassy area that gave this fortress its name, the Kula Megdan. You don't have to be much of a linguist to realize that this isn't a Slavic name, and the English translation, the Great Maidan, may not be much help. The word Maidan, with its variety of spellings, is used in most countries between Marrakesh and Kolkata and, for all I know, which is way short of bugger all, a lot of other places as well. Spelling is not a problem, especially in countries like Serbia, where the official script is Cyrillic. They use the same alphabet here as the Russians, for a variety of reasons, for instance as a symbol of their independence and political isolation, their religion and their sheer bloody-mindedness. Basically, a Maidan is a large assembly area just outside the walls of a fortification, or inside the walls of an outer ring of defences, or neither, or both. One thing that is certain, however, is that the Serbs got the name of the Great Maidan from their arch-enemies the Turks, and it's not hard to see why this fortress was of such strategic importance. A few steps up onto the castle walls answers that question at a glance. First, look back the way we have just come, towards the city and the gently rolling hills behind it, and there's the river Savo winding its slow way towards us, towards its end. Turn to your right and you will see why this castle has been so important. Ahead of us lies what looks at first like Lake Windermere, only with sunshine, but it's flowing towards the east. Commanding the confluence of the two rivers stands the Kula Megdan, towering over the mighty river Danube. But we can no longer avoid the elephant in the room. Or, rather, the whale in the fishbowl. Serbia has a problem with racism. I know every country has its racists, but most have laws and commonly shared attitudes to keep them under control. Eastern Europe has more than its fair share of neo-Nazis, but Serbia is something else. It is riddled from top to bottom with hatred. Like everywhere else, this country is made up overwhelmingly of decent, hard-working, generous people, but they have been let down badly by prevalent social attitudes which actively encourage racism. After so much bloody history and so many atrocities, hatred of all things Turkish is, I suppose, understandable, but the overwhelming majority of Serbs seem to have learned at their mother's knee that it's all right to hate everyone from outside Serbia. The UK is far from perfect, but British society does not tolerate brazen expressions of racial and religious discrimination. To the chagrin of my friends who live here, the opposite is the case in Serbia. The last time I was in Belgrade, I came as part of a delegation from a sister charity to my employer. There were 5 of us in all, and we reflected the nature of the international charity I was supposed to be supporting. The leader of our little group, a very grand lady from Tamil Nadu in southern India, 1 Italian woman, 1 female intern from Rwanda and 2 Englishmen. 1 dark-haired, that was me, and 1 blonde, my boss Eric. Like today, it was a beautiful fresh day and we all wanted to stretch our legs. My English colleague had previously walked from the hotel to the headquarters of our hosts, the Serbian Red Cross, and he was keen to show us a pretty little park on the way, like the good tourists we nearly were. We loafed in the hotel lobby until our guide arrived. She turned out to be a charming and almost impossibly diminutive woman from the Red Cross, who can't have weighed more than 6 stone wringing wet. When we suggested walking to work, she appeared to be worried. My colleague Eric said that he had not had any problems last time, and she replied, "You were just 2 men and there were no," her voice trailing off into silence. She rallied and suggested, "At least let me get a cab for the ladies." Talk about a red rag to a bull. Our venerable project leader Tap was bristling by now. Of course her real name wasn't Tap, but 80 years of fighting against intolerance and for equality had taught her that life's too short to have to spell out her Tamil name, which basically consisted of too many vowels and even more consonants. Dame Tap settled the argument by saying just 5 words to our guide. "Would you walk with us?" It was not a question. It was only a block away from the hotel that some of us started to regret our decision to walk. Half a dozen male youths stared at us brazenly and began to follow at a disrespectful distance. At first it was just furtive chatter, but after a few minutes it became clear that they were egging each other on to wolf whistle and to try unsuccessfully to pinch the ladies' bottoms, and then the monkey noises started. They ran around us, scratching their armpits and dragging their knuckles. They pretended to be peeling bananas and throwing them at the 2 black ladies. Dame Tap's skin was even darker than her African intern, but it was clearly not thin enough to let her be bothered by any of the infantile taunts. There were plenty of people on the pavements, but all they did was point and stare. Disapproving glances were aimed at us, not at our tormentors. A few grannies and grandpas followed us to the nearby park. By the time we got to the middle of the small park, we were surrounded by a motley crowd. Words were shouted and very reluctantly translated by our Serbian guide. Some of the comments were helpfully shouted in English. All were aimed at the 2 black women, or so we assumed. "Go home, gypsies," someone said, rather illogically, given the nomadic nature of whoever they thought they were addressing, presumably Tap. "Why are you wearing a sheet and sandals?" That one was definitely for Dame Tap, and one that also included our young Rwandan colleague. "Wash your face, wash your face." This was started by our banana miming friends, but echoed by others in the encircling crowd. Finally, an even louder chorus of "Death to the Turks" was followed by patriotic applause, And then several astonishing things happened all at once. The crowd dispersed as if it hadn't ever been there, and our hands were being shaken by a gaggle of smiling pensioners. A bottle of apricot brandy appeared out of nowhere, along with some plastic cups. The first mouthful tasted of summer fruit, followed by a red-hot poker down the esophagus. The second swig was even better. "I must apologize for my fellow countrymen," said one of the group, who had the air of a retired professor. His English was beautifully precise, but his sad expression was even more eloquent. One of our party tried to show sympathy. "It is still too soon after the war," she said, careful not to mention the British bombardment of Belgrade a mere 9 years earlier. If anything, this made the professor's expression sadder. "This hatred is not a consequence of our war," he said. "It is what caused it, but I still don't understand about the Turks," I chipped in. "I know about the centuries of warfare and atrocities, but what's that to do with us? None of us looks even remotely Turkish." "But there you are wrong," said the professor sadly, pointing to my English colleague with the white blonde hair. "I have read accounts of how medieval Turkish sultans recruited their elite Janissary corps from the parts of Eastern Europe where people had light-coloured hair. Whether our live-lamented Prime Minister got his shocking hair from his Turkish ancestors I neither know nor care. But it does make me sad to know that the list of all the countries friendly to Serbia ran as follows. Russia. That's why I was so keen on you coming with me so soon after this rather disturbing incident. Things are changing here. There's a hell of a long way to go, but as with all really important changes, momentum is everything. Racism is still deeply ingrained in Serbia's psyche, but it's no longer officially encouraged, or so it seems to me and my charity colleagues. And what is the catalyst for this slow, barely discernible change? In one word, tourism, or should that be dollars? There's a long way to go from the attitude so ably summed up by the great bard, "Nobody loves me, everybody hates me, I might as well go and eat worms." Hatred is born of fear, and it leads to fear and hatred in others. But can this beautiful country break out of its very own vicious circle, here, so soon after the shameful 1990s, with its horrors and war crimes? Could the real Serbian values of kindness and hospitality be making a comeback? The signs are there, as I hope you have already noticed. Tomorrow, we will visit a charity project in a poor suburb of Belgrade and see how older people are supporting each other and their community. They are part of the solution too, and I am proud that my British charity is helping them. But the luxury river cruise ships temporarily moored on the Sava are a more potent symbol of hope. Who knew that Belgrade would make such an ideal cruise destination? Who knew that money from tourists would finally persuade the Serbian government to deal with its antisocial behavior problem? Racism is still very strong here. It may only have been swept under the carpet, but that's a whole lot better than in your face. Who knew that a Serbian boy would develop into a global tennis hero, and that must be a good thing? Well, I'm hoping our little foray into the recent past will have given you an inkling. Like all hope, it is a fragile thing, especially in the face of a whole carousel full of historical baggage, but for me, it's still a hope and it tastes of apricot rockgot. If you thought Belgrade had its challenges, you should see our next destination. Really, you should.